You know how it is you see a celebrity facing like a huge wave of public attention, especially when there are legal things swirling around, and you can't help but wonder what's really going on,
Yeah.
behind the social media feeds.
hmm What's the story behind the story?
Exactly. So today we're diving into just that, looking at the situation around Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds amid all these allegations concerning Justin Baldoni. Something a lot of people seem to be talking about.
Yeah, it really is. It's this interesting mix of celebrity culture, public perception, and, well, the sometimes really murky world of online chatter and commentary.
Right. We're basically looking at how people online are trying to piece together what's happening when the main people involved, and crucially, their friends, aren't really saying much out loud.
So we've been looking through some of these online discussions, places where people are actively trying to figure out, why the silence from Lively and Reynolds' friends. What are the theories?
Yeah, our goal today is really to unpack those discussions, explore the different perspectives people are sharing online. What does this silence actually mean? What could be the reasons, and how does it maybe connect to, past things we've seen with these celebrities?
So we're kind of navigating this landscape of speculation, aren't we? Trying to understand the different ways people are viewing it, all their ideas about friendship, uh, potential legal moves, the weight of past events, all of it.
Okay, so let's start with that main point that keeps popping up.
Mhm.
The perceived quietness from Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' close friends, people like Taylor Swift, Hugh Jackman. Why haven't we seen more, I guess, public shows of support,
Mhm.
or even just, general social media interaction?
Well, that's one of the first things people jumped on in these discussions we looked at. It's not just about like big official statements.
Right.
It's more about the overall vibe, the online presence or lack thereof. Some users were pointing out that maybe their activity, Swift's and Jackman's, seemed to get a bit quieter, maybe more professional posts, even before all this current stuff blew up.
Which immediately makes you think, right, is this quietness now a direct reaction,
Mm-hmm.
a conscious choice
Mm-hmm.
because of the lawsuits?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it just maybe part of a bigger trend? Like maybe they were already pulling back a bit, wanting more privacy anyway.
Mm,
The why behind the silence really changes how you interpret it, I think.
absolutely. Because if being more private online was already happening, then, well, maybe the lack of posts now isn't really a statement about this specific situation. It's just consistent behavior.
Yeah.
But if there is a noticeable shift recently compared to how they usually are online, that could suggest something more deliberate, a decision to stay quiet right now.
And people in these online spaces, they've been, throwing around possible reasons for the quiet, whatever the timing. Legal advice is a big one.
Oh, definitely.
The idea that lawyers are probably telling everyone involved, look, just
Yeah.
don't say anything. Anything could be twisted or used later.
That's very standard. Very prudent, really, in situations like this. Anything said publicly, even if you mean well, could get taken way out of context or even, subpoenaed down the road. Silence is often the safest legal path.
Makes sense. Another idea that came up was maybe Blake and Ryan themselves asked their friends to keep a low profile on this.
Hmm.
Maybe to stop attracting even more attention or just to protect their friends from getting sucked into the negativity, the online attacks.
That also tracks, doesn't it, from a personal angle? They might just want to shield their friends from the kind of intense heat they're facing themselves. It could be about setting boundaries, protecting their circle during a rough time.
Right.
And this leads right into how people are actually reading this quietness. Because it's not just noting the silence. People are actively trying to decode it, figure out what it means or what it doesn't mean.
Yeah, because no statement doesn't automatically mean no support.
Right.
There was this interesting counterpoint in the discussions that pushed back on the idea that there's zero support visible.
Hmm.
Like with Hugh Jackman, for instance,
Yeah.
some pointed out, hey, he's still liking Ryan Reynolds' posts. He even went to Ryan's show earlier this year. And someone mentioned a photo from a movie set suggesting Jackman was physically there with Lively recently.
See, that really shows how tricky it is to interpret these little online signals.
Yeah.
Like attending a show, it could mean so many things.
Totally.
Is it real support? Just keeping up professional appearances? Or just, a casual click? Hard to know the real feeling behind it without more.
And the talk around Taylor Swift,
Mm.
well, that seems even more intense. Obviously, given how famous she is and how close she is known to be with Blake Lively.
Right.
The feeling from some online is just like, no way would Taylor ditch Blake. They bring up Taylor's own history with, crazy public frenzies and online pile-ons.
Mm-hmm. Drawing
Yeah.
that parallel.
Yeah. And there's almost this frustration that Swift is getting dragged into the Baldoni situation at all. Some comments were like, this has nothing to do with her, and mentioned a claim that she hadn't even heard of Baldoni before this whole thing started.
That definitely sounds like protective fans or observers, wanting to shield someone they like from something they see as totally separate. And, comparing it to Swift's past experiences, it does make sense that people assume she'd be offering support privately, even if she's not tweeting about it.
One of the initial commenters we looked at kind of circled back to this, really stressing the history and depth of these friendships.
Yeah.
They were clearly frustrated with this assumption that celebrity friendships are all shallow or just for PR. Like, these aren't just work friends. These are often friendships that go back years and years.
That is such a good point. We tend to project so much onto celebrities, but their relationships, even formed in, the weird world of fame, can be just as real and deep as anyone's. Dismissing them as superficial misses that shared history.
Okay, so now the conversation kind of pivots towards something from the past that always seems to come up when Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds are under scrutiny, and their wedding. Specifically, that it was held at a plantation.
Ah, yes. That's definitely a big one from their past.
Yeah.
It drew a lot of criticism, understandably, and it remains sensitive because of the history and, the legacy of slavery tied to venues like that.
So one person in the discussion was expressing, like, just weariness that this keeps coming up. The wedding was over 10 years ago now,
Hmm.
and they argued that, society's understanding around these things has shifted quite a lot since then.
Hmm.
They also brought up that the venue itself is apparently doing educational work now about its history, and that Lively and Reynolds did publicly apologize and made donations, something this commenter claimed other couples who married there didn't do.
That brings up that whole complex question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How do we view past actions now? Is there space to acknowledge apologies or efforts to learn and make amends? When does a past mistake stop being the main thing defining someone publicly?
And someone else agreed with that weariness, feeling it was unfair that the plantation wedding gets constantly rehashed, while alleged past issues involving Justin Baldoni, like a lawsuit mentioned about racial discrimination and retaliation, maybe aren't getting the same constant attention in this specific context. They suggested maybe a double standard in what past actions people focus on.
That's a really crucial point about context and, well, whataboutism sometimes, but also just consistency. It forces us to think about how we weigh different past actions and if we apply the same standards to everyone.
Yeah, and then someone else jumped in, a bit sarcastically, noting they'd seen arguments saying Baldoni's past stuff is somehow irrelevant to this current lawsuit.
Which, of course, just highlights how selective people can be when they bring up the past, right? Its relevance becomes really flexible depending on the story someone wants to tell.
Another take in the discussion fully acknowledged the plantation wedding was, quote, 100% wrong. They understood why some people wouldn't want to forgive it. But they also pointed to Lively and Reynolds' later actions, like redoing their vows somewhere else, making big donations as maybe signs of learning and growth. This person even connected the refusal to see that potential for change to, broader cancel culture trends.
That view really tackles those ideas of accountability versus redemption and the, let's face it, often unforgiving nature of online talk. It asks, do our public stories even allow for real change? Are we willing to see it when people try to fix past mistakes?
And the same commenter made another interesting point. They saw a potential hypocrisy, noting that Baldoni has sort of built part of his public image around talking about his past mistakes and his journey of change.
His vulnerability narrative.
Right. Yet there seems to be maybe more skepticism about whether Lively could have also learned and evolved from her past actions.
That's a really sharp observation about how different public figures frame their growth narratives and how we, the public, receive them. It suggests things like existing perception, the nature of the past actions, maybe even how the story of change is told, all influence whether we believe it.
Okay, let's swing back to the silence of the friends. The discussion then looked at the possible impact if they did speak out. One idea was that the quiet is almost certainly a coordinated strategy,
Carefully considered, yeah.
probably guided by lawyers,
Mm-hmm.
but they also raised the very real fear of online harassment from pro-Baldoni commenters as a major reason friends might stay silent.
That brings in that really critical factor, the online battlefield, basically. The potential fallout from engaging publicly on something so charged, fear of abuse, of targeted harassment, of just the sheer volume of negativity that can absolutely silence people, even if they want to show support.
And someone else backed that up, mentioning they'd heard about a Lively supporter allegedly getting really serious threats, online death threats, rape threats.
Wow.
So they suggested staying quiet isn't just legal, it's also about safety. And maybe keeping their own social media feeds usable for, promoting their own projects, not just getting flooded.
That's a pretty grim reminder of the dark side of this stuff, how quickly things can escalate into personal attacks and threats. It really highlights the risks for anyone who steps into the public arena on a sensitive topic.
There was also a really interesting specific point about Taylor Swift. Someone suggested that if she'd been part of any private talks or meetings about these issues,
Hmm.
she might be specifically told by lawyers not to comment publicly, to avoid any problems if she ever had to, like, testify later on.
Oh, that's very smart, very legally sound thinking. Any public statements she made beforehand could be picked apart, maybe used against her or her friends in court. Staying completely silent protects the integrity of any potential future testimony she might give.
Another view was that the silence is partly to field friends from what one person called Baldoni's hornet's nest of fans, and also mentioned apparent right-wing support he's gotten, on top of just the ongoing lawsuits themselves.
So that brings in a wider social or even political angle. It suggests the controversy has drawn in different online groups, some potentially very aggressive. That kind of charged atmosphere makes it even riskier for anyone seen as being on the other side to say anything.
Okay, let's dig a bit more into Taylor Swift specifically. Several people who seemed pretty familiar with her online patterns pointed out something important,
What's that?
that she, generally speaking, keeps her social media pretty focused on work, like music, tours, announcements. She doesn't actually post a lot of personal stuff about her friends publicly anyway.
Ah, okay. That's really crucial context then. If you follow her closely, her relative quiet on this might not seem strange at all. If her usual strategy is professional first online, then expecting lots of personal posts about friendships might just be misreading her normal approach.
Someone I mentioned having seen Swift out with Lively privately sometime last fall, suggesting, just because it's not on Instagram doesn't mean support isn't happening offline.
Right, absence of evidence is an evidence of absence.
Exactly. And they also noted Swift seemed to be keeping a slightly lower public profile overall recently, maybe after that period of super intense media focus.
That makes sense too. Reinforces the idea that lack of public noise doesn't equal lack of private support. Celebrities like her have to manage that public-private line carefully, and quiet periods aren't unusual.
This same person also made the point that Swift has a history, apparently, of sticking by friends even when those friends hit public controversies.
That suggests a pattern of loyalty then, not easily swayed by public opinion storms around her friends, which would make it seem more likely her support for Lively is still strong, just maybe behind the scenes.
Another angle was that any public support from Swift would probably just get twisted,
Yeah, I can see that.
used against Lively and Reynolds, possibly just adding fuel to the fire, weaponized in the whole situation. This person felt her silence now is totally consistent with her usual non-work social media use, especially maybe after bad experiences she's had online in the past.
That really underlines the strategic tightrope someone like Swift walks.
Hmm.
Her huge platform means anything she does or says publicly about something sensitive involving friends could have massive, maybe unintended blowback.
Someone even brought up the Keisha situation from years ago, how Swift reportedly gave Keisha support privately during her very public legal fight.
Ah, using that as a potential parallel.
Yeah. Suggesting maybe Swift's support for Lively is similar happening behind closed doors, away from the spotlight. They also stressed how Swift getting publicly involved could actually distract from the main issues, the actual allegations against Baldoni, and just create more drama around her.
That's a really insightful comparison. It suggests maybe Swift is very aware of how her fame can either help or accidentally hinder. Private support lets her be there for her friend without potentially escalating the public circus or shifting the focus.
And then finally, just briefly, the discussion touched on Hugh Jackman again. Someone noted he still seems to regularly interact with Ryan Reynolds' Instagram posts, liked stuff, and, as mentioned, went to his show in January, which, seems to suggest things are still good there.
Yeah, that does offer some visible evidence, doesn't it? At least for Jackman, the connection with Reynolds seems solid, supportive. Even without big public statements on this specific issue, that continued engagement suggests a level of solidarity remains.
So, wrapping up this deep dive into these online conversations, wow, it's clear you've laid out a really, really complex picture here. The silence from Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' friends, it's being read in so many ways.
Strategic legal move, protective shield for themselves or their friends, or maybe just how they normally are online these days.
What's really striking is just how much guessing and interpreting happens when there's an information vacuum, right?
Totally. People build whole narratives from tiny scraps of social media activity, from past events, from their own ideas about how celebrity works.
And the way past controversies, like the plantation wedding, keep coming back,
Ah.
it really highlights that long shadow public mistakes can cast. And the constant challenge celebrities have managing how people see them.
It also really puts the spotlight on how hard public forgiveness can be to achieve and how past actions keep getting reevaluated as, social standards change over time.
And finally, all the talk around Taylor Swift's role or lack thereof, it just shows the incredible scrutiny that comes with those high-profile friendships. And the potential fallout from any public move in these really sensitive situations. It really makes you think about that balance. Public image, private bonds, legal realities.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And maybe this deep dive leaves us all with a question to chew on. In this world where everyone's connected, constantly watching, constantly commenting online, how much can we really know about the true dynamics of these celebrity friendships, about the pressures they face when their private lives crash into public legal fights? And I guess, what does all this tell us about support, about accountability in this digital age we're all living in? Definitely something to keep thinking about.